The wind drifted gently over the green hills of Connaught. The clouds, slow and soft, seemed to glide just above the peaks, as though they too longed to rest. Among the heather, wildflowers swayed in time with the breeze, and the lakes, ancient as the memory of the world, reflected the sky with a calm blue stillness. In that distant age, when the Tuatha De Danann still ruled over Ireland, there lived a noble lord named Lear. He was tall, with a clear and thoughtful gaze, as deep as the waters of Lake Derivara, and his home stood ringed by forests, where deer and wolves lived beneath the protection of the old gods. Lear was loved and honored among his people, though a shadow of loneliness followed him. His wife, Aob, the most beautiful of the daughters of Bodbediarg, the high king of the gods, had filled his life with music and tenderness. Together they had 4 children, Fionnuala, the eldest, with a pure voice and wise eyes, Aod, brave and endlessly curious, and the twins, Fiachra, and Con, who always laughed at the same moment, as though they shared a single heart. But happiness is fragile, even for the gods. One grey morning, while the lilies on the lake still held dew on their petals, Aobi fell ill. No one knew what sickness had touched her. Neither druid nor healer could save her. And in the silence of the house, Lear was left alone with his children and his grief. For a long time, the sound of the flute vanished from his halls. Only the children's laughter brought a little life back into the air, and so it might have remained had Bodbediarg, king of the Tuatha De Danann, not looked upon his son-in-law's sorrow and decided to ease it. He sent another of his daughters, Aoife, to Lear's house, so that she might become his new wife. She too was beautiful, but hers was a colder beauty, like the light of a distant star. At first, she showed kindness to the children and shared meals with them beneath the great oak in the courtyard. But before long, jealousy began to grow inside her. She envied their joy, the devotion with which Lear looked at them, the way the world itself seemed to turn around those 4 small souls. As an autumn evening faded, while the birds searched for shelter and the air smelled of damp leaves, Awaf made a choice that would forever alter the fate of Ireland. "Come with me," she told them with a sweet smile. "We are going to visit your grandfather, Bodbediarg. The lake will carry us part of the way, and maidens with flower crowns will be waiting for you there." Trusting her, the children followed and climbed into the carriage that creaked through the mist. They crossed forests and rivers until they reached Lake Derivara, its waters shining beneath the grey light of dawn. There, our wife ordered the journey to stop. "Come down, little ones," she said softly. "Let us play for a while before we continue." Fionnuala was the first to notice the tremor in her stepmother's voice. "Aunt Awaif, why are you crying?" she asked, stepping closer. The woman looked at her, and her eyes were no longer human. In them burned the glow of an ancient and terrible magic. She raised her yew wand, the same kind with which druids traced circles of power, and in a shaking voice she spoke words that seemed to rise from the wind itself. "May you become like water that never rests. May your voices be the voices of the air, and your home the lake. So shall it be for 900 years." A burst of white light engulfed them. When it faded, in the place where the children of Lear had stood, there were only 4 swans with shining feathers, and yet their voices remained. "Aoife, what have you done to us?" cried Fionnuala, her heart breaking. But when Aoife saw what she had done, such a deep cold seized her that her own magic turned against her. Her skin paled like moonlight, and her soul was marked forever. "I cannot undo it," she whispered, "but I will grant you one gift. You shall keep your human voices and your human minds. You will be able to sing, and your songs will bring peace to all who hear them." And with that, she left them there, beating their wings over the lake, while the day darkened around them. When Lear learned what had happened, he rode to the lake with his heart in pieces. "Fionnuala, Iodh, Fiacra, Con," he cried from the shore, and the swans came toward him, drifting like white shadows. "Father, we are here," said Fionnuala, in a voice like the echo of wind across water. The man fell to his knees. His tears mingled with the waves. For days and nights, he remained beside them, speaking to them, singing to them, promising he would never forget them. And the whisper of his sorrow spread across all Ireland until it reached the palace of Bodb Dearg, who, upon learning the truth, banished Aoife and condemned her to wander shapeless through the air, a prisoner of her own spell. So began the long journey of the children of Lear. For 300 years they lived upon Lake Deravara, where the mists were gentle and the hills sheltered them. There they learned to sing songs that soothed the sleep of men, melodies that some say can still be heard when evening falls. But the time of the gods is not the time of men, and their fate would carry them farther still. One morning the wind changed direction, bringing with it the scent of sea and salt foam. Fionnuala understood that their time on the lake had ended. "My brothers," she said gently, "we must fly north to the Sea of Moyle. There we shall spend the next 300 years." And together they rose into the air, leaving behind the home of their childhood, the echo of their father calling to them, and the music of reeds brushing the water. The air grew cold, the land lost its color, and the loneliness of the sea began to close around them. The Sea of Moyle stretched before them like a vast plain of silver and shadow. Between Ireland and Scotland, the waves struck with a force that seemed like the pulse of the world itself. The wind, heavy with salt and ancient whispers, swirled among the cliffs, and the sky, so wide and endless, barely marked the line between cloud and water. The children of Lear flew for days until they found refuge among the rocks. There, amid the foam and the echoes of the sea, their second life began. The first winter came without warning. The air turned so bitter that frost covered their wings, and the sea roared furiously beneath the moon. But Fionnuala, always calm, kept them together. She taught them to shelter beneath the waves when the wind became unbearable, and to seek the warmer currents rising from the south. "Remember," she said each night, "this will not last forever. Our souls are still the same, and the song within us will keep us safe." Aod, the eldest of the brothers, was fearless. He swam far from the others, exploring the small islands, and always returned with stories of seals that sang at dawn, of fish that glittered like stars beneath the water, of gulls that knew the secret language of the wind. The twins, Fiachra and Con, were inseparable. They flew side by side, beating their wings in perfect rhythm, and their games at dusk looked like ancient choreographies written by the sea itself. Fionnuala, however, carried a deep silence within her chest. On the calmest days, when the sun turned the water to gold, she felt the faintest comfort. It came from the memory of her father, of her home, of that human life that already seemed like a distant dream. At times, the murmur of the sea blurred into voices. In the twilight, she thought she could hear Lear's name traveling on the wind, and then her eyes would cloud, not with rain, but with longing. The years passed, and men began to forget the names of the Tuatha De Danann. New settlers in Ireland built villages of stone, lit fires on the mountains, and told stories in the warmth of the flame. Yet on the stillest nights, some fishermen swore they heard a distant song that lulled the waves themselves to sleep. That song was the song of the children of Lear. One night, a storm struck the sea with such violence that it seemed determined to erase the world. The waves rose like mountains, and thunder mingled with the roar of the wind. "Fionnuala!" cried Con, fighting to keep his balance. "The waves are dragging us away." "Stay close to me," she commanded. "Form a circle." And the four swans pressed together beneath the freezing rain, becoming a single white shape in the heart of the chaos. The wind drove them northward, where the sea was darker still. For a moment, they believed the end had come. But when dawn finally broke through the clouds, an arc of light spread above them. The sea grew calm, and peace returned, as though the gods themselves had heard their prayer. The years that followed were quieter. They grew used to the rhythm of the sea, to the turning of the seasons, to the songs of the seals. Fionnuala often sang old melodies to comfort her brothers, songs of green hills and cottages where the fire of home still burned. So the centuries passed. Mountains wore away, men changed their weapons, and new languages began to echo along the shores. But the children of Lear remained, floating upon the waves, guardians of time and memory. Until one day, a warm current came from the west. It carried the scent of earth and flowers. Fionnuala knew that their years in the Sea of Moyle were over. "The time has come to go west, my brothers," she said softly. "The waters of Iris Domnan are waiting for us, where the suns sink low. There we shall spend the final 300 years. The journey was long. They flew over deserted islands and along coasts where men had already raised fortresses of stone. On some beaches they heard bells. They were not the bells of druids, but gentler ones, humbler ones. Fionnuala felt a tremor pass through her. The world had changed. When, at last, they reached the western waters, the sea welcomed them with calm. These were gentler seas, the color of jade. There the children of Lear found a small islet covered in grass and white flowers. They chose to remain there. Time continued to flow, but they no longer counted the years. Sometimes, on the horizon, they saw lights that belonged not to gods, but to human villages. They heard bells and new voices speaking of love, forgiveness, and hope. One evening, as the sun sank slowly, Fionnuala saw a figure on the shore. It was a man dressed in a simple robe, carrying a wooden cross. She drew near without fear, for her heart felt peace. "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit," said the man when he saw them. "Who are you, creatures so beautiful and so sorrowful?" Fionnuala answered in a human voice, though it came from the throat of a swan. "We are the children of Lear, condemned by an ancient spell. We have lived in water and wind for 900 years. The monk, deeply moved, made the sign of the cross over them. Then the time of your suffering has ended. Come, for the world has changed. There are no longer gods who demand punishment so long." His words seemed to open an invisible door, A white light surrounded them, warm and peaceful. Their feathers began to fall like snowflakes, and beneath them, slowly, the four regained their human form. They were old, so very old that their bodies seemed almost made of light. Yet their eyes still shone with the innocence of their earliest days. Fionuala looked out over the sea one last time. "Our home will always live in the waters and in the song of the wind," she whispered. "But at last we may rest." The monk covered them in cloaks and brought them to his church, where the four of them fell asleep as night descended, and their souls departed together like swans at dawn. Since then, it is said that whenever the wind passes over the lakes of Ireland, a distant echo can be heard, a soft song that calms the heart. It is the children of Lear, reminding the world that even in sorrow there is beauty, and that every grief one day becomes peace. The dawn that followed that night carried an almost supernatural stillness. The sea was so calm it looked like a mirror, and the sky, washed in soft rose, reflected the purity of the rest the children of Lear had finally reached. In the humble church where the monk had taken them, a faint fragrance still lingered, a mingling of sea salt and heather blossoms. The monk, whose name was Eden, rose early to pray. When he approached the altar, he saw the peaceful bodies of Fionuala, Aod, Fiachra, and Con wrapped in light. They did not look asleep, but transformed. Around them, a golden mist lifted softly, and in the air there was the faint murmur of wings. Eden fell to his knees. He did not weep. He smiled with quiet humility. "The world has changed," he whispered, "but your story will never be forgotten," he ordered. "A stone cross to be raised beside the coast, so that all who passed might remember the gentleness and sorrow of those who had been swans for centuries." Upon the stone, he carved with his own hands a few simple words. "Here rest the children of Lear, who taught the sea how to sing." Villagers began arriving from the nearby settlements, drawn by the rumors. Some brought flowers. Others simply stood in silence before the sea. On quiet nights, when the wind blew from the north, the women swore they could hear a faint song that lulled children to sleep and soothed restless hearts. Aiden, now old himself, would often sit beside the lake and tell visitors the story of the four siblings. But he did not speak of it as a tragedy. He told it as a lesson in love that outlives time itself. "They were not punished, but chosen," he would say softly. In their song was kept the memory of what the world had been before men forgot how to listen. And so, little by little, the tale of the children of Lear became a song. The bards began to weave it into their stories, their harps weeping gentle notes. Children learned the names Fionuala, Aod, Fiachra, Con, and repeated them in the evening prayers to invite good dreams. Centuries passed. Castles rose and fell. Religions changed their shape. The roads of Ireland filled with travelers and seekers. But the echo of that song was never lost. It is said that on certain nights, when the sky is veiled in mist and the water turns silver, four swans descend from the north. They fly together over the lakes, brushing the surface with their wings and leaving behind them a thread of light. No one can follow them for long, because they vanish into the mist just as the first ray of dawn touches the horizon. Some believe they are only the reflection of the wind, but the old ones insist they are the souls of the children of Lear, returning from time to watch over Ireland. And when the air carries their song, even the animals of the forest stop in their tracks, and the world itself seems to fall asleep for a moment. Their song speaks of love of loss, and of forgiveness. But above all, it speaks of hope. Fionuala was always the soul of that small family, and her voice became a symbol of strength. Through the centuries, Irish women sang her name while waiting for the return of sailors, or while tending their children beside the fire. Iode, the brave one, became an emblem of courage in the face of hardship. Young men invoked him before setting out on a journey, remembering his strength against the storms. The twins, Fiachra and Con, came to represent brotherhood, the harmony of kindred spirits. In the monasteries of the north, monks often illuminated manuscripts with two intertwined swans in their honor. And though the legend gathered embellishments as the years went on, at the heart of every version, the same truth remained: that true love does not break, even when it changes shape, that the voice of the soul can survive time, water, and silence. One summer evening, many centuries later, a shepherd boy was resting beside Lake Deravara. The air was warm, and dragonflies danced above the water. Then suddenly, a distant sound reached his ears. It was not the wind, nor the whisper of reeds. It was a melody, soft, as though someone were singing in an ancient tongue. The boy sat upright and stared toward the center of the lake. There, far in the distance, he thought he saw a white gleam moving slowly across the surface. "Mother," he said later, when he returned to his village, "I heard the lake singing." She smiled at him with tenderness. "Then you heard the children of Lear," she replied. "They watch over those who still have ears for the music of the world." And from that day on, whenever the boy passed by the water, he bowed his head in respect, certain that beyond the veil of time, 4 pure souls were still keeping watch over the valleys and coasts of Ireland. And so the story of the children of Lear ended, and never truly ended at all. Because true legends do not die. They dissolve into the air, mingle with the rain, hide among the reeds, and return in the form of a whisper. If you ever walk beside an Irish lake at dusk, be silent for a moment. Listen to the sound of the wind. And if you hear a distant song, soft and clear, do not be afraid. It is the children of Lear, still singing so the world may remember peace. And when you close your eyes, the sound of the water will become their voice, a voice that belongs neither to the past nor to the future, but to the eternal dream of Ireland. The Lady of Grianan Ailey. In the north of Ireland, where the hills roll like sleeping waves, and the air carries the scent of heather and distant sea, a solitary hill rises into the sky. At its summit, the ancients built a ring of stone, so old it seems to have been born from the very heart of the earth. That place is called Grianan Ailey, the son of Ailehic, and its name still holds the echoes of centuries and kings, of battles and oaths, but also of a presence older than the memory of men. The Lady of Grianan. When the sun sinks toward the west, staining the sky with amber and fire, and the shadows stretch across the valley of Inishowen, some shepherds say they have seen a figure moving among the stones. They say she wears a white dress that floats like mist over the grass, and that her hair, as golden as flax under the sun, seems to catch fire in the day's last light. They say her footsteps make no sound, and that sometimes a distant music can be heard, sweet and sorrowful, as though a harp were playing by itself among the stones. That is the lady. Some call her Aithne, others Aine or Graine. For in Ireland names intertwine and shift like the pathways of the wind, but everyone knows she belongs to that place. She is the guardian spirit of Grianan, the one who has watched over it since before the kings of Ailich were born and died, since the days when gods still walked among men. Long centuries ago, when Ireland was a tapestry of tribes and bloodlines, and the Tuatha fought over hills and lakes, Grianan was not merely stone, it was a throne of power. From there ruled the kings of the north, descendants of Niall Naogialach, Niall of the 9 hostages. It was said that as long as Grianan remained standing, the line of Ailich would never fall. But even the oldest stone strongholds hold secrets deeper than war. The elders of Inishowen used to tell that before the kings, a sacred well stood there, a healing well that fed the streams of the valley. 3 tutelary deities protected it, the Dagda, the Tuatha De Danann, and a solar maiden named Aine of the Light. It was said of her that she could bring abundance to the land, or take it away if the hearts of men turned cruel. When mortals arrived, they built Grianan over that well, enclosing the spring and its power. And Aine, the Maiden of Light, was forgotten, but not entirely. On nights of the full moon, when the wind carries the song of the stones, some have heard her lament. Others have felt a gentle presence, like a breeze brushing the face, and a voice whispering ancient words in an Irish no one remembers anymore. There was a time, they say, when a young prince of the north climbed the hill in search of counsel. He was a noble youth of pure heart, named Fergus MacEirc, heir to Ailich. He had heard of the spirit who dwelled among the stones, and so he climbed at night, when the sky was a dome of stars above the dark sea. There, at the center of the ring, he saw her. The lady stood beside the covered well, her face serene, her eyes so clear they mirrored the moon. "Are you the one who watches over this place?" he asked, unafraid. "I am the one who was, and the one who still remains," the lady answered in a voice like flowing water. "Why do you come, son of men?" Fergus bowed before her. "I come to ask for wisdom. The kingdoms of the north are preparing for war. They say it is my destiny to fight, but I fear ambition will destroy us." The lady was silent for a long while. The wind blew softly and the moonlight made the stones shine like silver. "Men seek power," she said at last, "but they forget balance. Grianan was raised over the spring of life, and its strength depends upon harmony between the visible world and the unseen one. If your bloodline rules with justice and compassion, the sun of Ailich will keep shining. But if your heirs forget their reverence for the land and its spirits, the stones will be drained of light, and Grianan will become nothing but a memory." The young prince bowed his head, and when he looked up again, the lady had vanished. From that night on, Fergus ruled wisely. It was said that every dawn he climbed the walls of Grianan and offered a cup of water to the rising sun in honor of the lady. And while he kept that vow, the land flourished. But the centuries passed, and men forgot the old promises. The kings of Ailich began to turn against one another. Grianan was besieged, destroyed, rebuilt, and abandoned. The hills fell into silence, and only the wind kept climbing to the summit. They say that then the lady wept. She wept so much that her tears filled the sacred well beneath the stones once more, and that ever since, whenever mist covers the hill, her figure appears there, sorrowful and serene, gazing westward, where the sun sinks into the sea. Some believe she is still waiting, waiting for the day when men will remember the old words and restore the balance. Others say her weeping is the morning dew, that her hair is the drifting fog, and that her voice can be heard in the whisper of the rushes when the wind blows in from the Atlantic. And so, century after century, the legend of the Lady of Grianan Ailig has remained alive, soft as an echo, unseen yet present, as though the land itself were breathing her name. There are nights when the clear sky reveals the Milky Way stretched above the ruins of the fort. And then, if one listens with an open heart, it is possible to feel something deeper than silence, an ancient pulse, a golden sigh passing through time. Because Grianan is not only stone, it is memory, and the lady who dwells there is not a ghost that haunts, but a guardian who remembers. As the centuries passed, Grianan became a ruin. Norse invasions ravaged the north of Ireland, and the stone towers that had once reflected the dawn were covered by moss and silence. Even so, the villagers of the valley never stopped looking up at the hill with reverence. They called it An Grianan na Mbansi, the refuge of the woman from the other world. On the nights of Samhain, when the veil between worlds grows thin and the souls of the ancients cross from one side to the other, the village elders would climb in procession to the summit. They carried no torches, only oil lamps, and they set them among the stones to honor the lady. No one spoke loudly. No one dared look directly toward the center of the ring. It was said that if she was pleased, a warm breeze would pass through the circle, and the flames of the lamps would not go out. The children listened to these stories with wide eyes. In the houses, by the warmth of the fire, the grandmothers told how the lady had once been the daughter of gods, born from the radiance of the sun. Her name, they said, came from Grian, meaning sun, and she had loved the earth so deeply that she chose to remain in it when her people departed for the invisible kingdoms. Others, however, told a different version, that the lady had been a mortal princess, imprisoned within Grianan by an enchantment that only human goodness could break. Whatever the truth may have been, the mystery of her existence bound both stories together, the divine and the human, as though Ireland itself were breathing through her legend. There came a winter so harsh that the lakes froze and sheep died beneath the snow. At that time, a young woman named Mara Nidonchadha lived in the valley, a shepherdess with black hair and green eyes like the hills after rain. Her family had lost nearly everything: the flock, the land, even hope. One night, while tending the last of the sheep near the stream, she saw a light high above on Grianan. At first, she thought it was a shepherd's fire, but the light was too soft, too golden, and seemed to float above the stones. Without thinking, she began to climb the hill. The icy wind struck her face, but something inside her guided her upward, a silent certainty. When she reached the summit, the air was warmer. Snow did not cover the circle, as though the place breathed its own climate. And there, among the shadows, she saw her. The lady stood beside the well, her white dress shining with an almost lunar radiance. Her face glowed with serenity, and her eyes, blue as summer skies, looked upon Mara with a mixture of tenderness and ancient sorrow. "You have come when few dare," said the lady in a voice that seemed to caress the air. "Why do you seek me?" Mara fell to her knees, unable to look away. "I do not seek you, my lady," she whispered. "I seek comfort. My people are starving. The land is cold and dry. The fields bear no fruit." Silence stretched for a few moments. Only the murmur of the wind could be heard. "The balance has been broken," the lady said at last. "Men forgot the promise. The water of the well sleeps, and while it sleeps, the north will continue to suffer." Mara lifted her gaze. "What can I do? I am no queen, no wise woman, only a shepherdess." The lady smiled. "Sometimes the humblest heart is the only one able to awaken the spring. You must offer something pure, something born of love, not of the desire for power." A soft light flowed from her hands, and a small stone bowl emerged from the ground. Inside it rested a single drop of water, gleaming like a diamond. "Carry this drop to the stream in your valley," she told her. "Pour it there at dawn. If your heart is sincere, the spring will flow again and the land will be reborn. But remember this, speak of it to no one, or the gift will fade." Mara took the bowl carefully. The warmth coming from it was comforting, like the fire of home. "I will do it, my lady," she whispered. When she looked up again, the lady had disappeared. All that remained was mist turning above the well, and the fragrance of flowers that do not bloom in winter. The girl descended in silence and reached her cottage before dawn. She hid the bowl beneath her cloak and waited for the first light of day. Then she walked to the stream, whose waters were frozen. With trembling hands, she poured the drop into the current. At first, nothing happened. Then, a warm flow began to rise from below, melting the ice. Within moments, the water was running again, clear and alive. The animals that remained came near to drink, and the sound of the stream mingled with the song of birds no one had heard in months. Mara smiled, and for one brief moment she thought she heard a distant voice saying, "The balance returns." That spring, the fields turned green again. Flowers covered the hillsides, and the air filled with bees. The village laughed once more, never knowing what miracle had saved them. Only Mara, in silence, left a handful of flowers by the stream every dawn, in gratitude to the Lady of Griana. With the passing of years, the story became a song. The bards told it by the hearth, the young shepherdess who spoke with the spirit of the sun, the drop of life that awakened the sleeping land, and the lady who still watches over her own. But as with everything in Ireland, legends never truly die. At times, when the sun sets behind the hills and the sky ignites with gold, a shining reflection rises above Grianan. Some say it is only the play of light upon the stone. Others say the lady is still there, watching, smiling to see that her land still lives. And there are still those who claim that if you climb in silence and leave fresh flowers on the wall, a warm breeze will brush your cheek, and an ancient voice will whisper your name, blessing you with the peace of centuries. Because Griana Ailig is not merely a ruin, it is the heart of the north, an echo from a time when men and spirits walked together, when words still held power and light answered to love. And the lady, she is still there, invisible to impatient eyes, yet always present to the one who listens calmly to the language of the wind. With the passing of centuries, the story of Mara and the lady slowly became legend, and the legend became a whisper. The old bards died, and the new ones sang songs of kings and battles. Yet among the hills of Donegal, mothers still told their children that Grianan was a sacred place, and that whoever climbed there with a pure heart never came back, empty-handed. Then came the time when Christian monks began raising stone churches upon the old burial mounds. They sought to erase the memory of the ancient gods, but Ireland is a land of deep memory, and in every church wall there always remained an echo of what had come before. a stone from Grianan, a cross carved over a solar symbol, a tale no one dared entirely deny. In a monastery by the fjord of Lofswilly lived a young scribe named Brannan Macruadri. He was a curious, quiet young man, and he had a gift for listening to the murmurs of the wind. He spent hours copying manuscripts, but at night when the others slept, he would climb the hills to gaze at the distant light of Grianan. Sometimes he saw flashes above the stones, as though an invisible fire were passing over them. One summer night, while the sky gleamed with thousands of stars, he decided to climb all the way to the summit. The path was covered with heather blossoms, and the air smelled of honey. Brannan carried an oil lamp and a notebook, hoping to find inspiration for his chronicles. But when he reached the stone circle, the lamp went out, though there was no wind. The silence was so deep he could hear the beating of his own heart. Then a gentle music began to fill the air, harp notes, slow and clear, that seemed to rise from the ground itself. Brannan felt a shiver run through him, not from fear, but from wonder. And there she was, the Lady of Grianan Aili, radiant beneath the moon, her white form illuminating the stones as though they were made of silver. "You have come with reverence," she said, without moving her lips. "The wind has carried your name to me." Brannan knelt, not knowing whether he ought to pray or remain silent. "I have heard of you, my lady. In the manuscripts they call you a pagan spirit, but the elders call you a protector. I have come to learn the truth." The lady watched him in silence. Her eyes were clear, filled with a wisdom that ached. I'm neither goddess nor ghost. I was a guardian of balance, when men and the earth still spoke the same language. But when walls of faith were raised, and people forgot how to listen, my voice became an echo. Brannan lowered his head. "Then why do you remain here if the world has changed?" She extended her hand, and a golden glow wrapped itself around the well at the center of the circle. "Because the sun still rises, and love that protects does not disappear. As long as someone remembers, even if only a single soul, the light remains." The young man felt those words burn themselves into his mind. He wanted to write them down, but his notebook grew damp, not from rain, but from a tear falling from the lady's eyes. "Are you crying, my lady?" he asked in a trembling voice. "I weep for what men have forgotten," she replied. "There is no power greater than tenderness, and yet it is the first thing they abandon." Brannan looked up. The lady stretched out her hand, and a drop of light fell upon his forehead. "Carry this with you," she said. "When you return to the monastery, write not only of kings and battles, write also of silence and of the love that holds the earth together. Write it in gentle words, as though they were petals resting on water." The young man nodded. When he looked again, the lady had disappeared, but the central stone of Grianan was glowing with a faint radiance, and in his mind the notes of the invisible harp were still ringing. Brannan returned to the monastery with his heart aflame. That very night he began to write. His texts spoke of the union between sky and earth, of kindness as an eternal force, of the music that rises from the soul when man truly listens to the world. The monks regarded him with suspicion, but his calligraphy was so beautiful and his words so pure that no one dared destroy them. Years passed, and that manuscript was lost in the turning tides of time. Even so, those who came later said that in every abbey of the north there was always some monk who, without knowing why, wrote verses about a lady of light who wept over a stone well. And so the lady remained alive in the written word and in the air. There were also those who saw her in times of war. In the days when towers burned and villages stood empty, some soldiers swore they had seen a woman in white walking through the smoke, stopping beside the wounded. Wherever she passed, fear dissolved, and horses ceased their frantic cries. At times, she would bend over a dying man, touch his chest, and whisper a word only he could understand. No one ever heard her curse or demand anything, only weep, as though the whole world were a child she longed to comfort. And even when the hill of Grianan lay buried beneath centuries of grass and forgetfulness, her presence endured, quiet and steadfast, like the root of a tree still alive beneath the earth. The peasants who worked the nearby lands said that in the summer dawns, the mist formed figures over the summit. Some saw a maiden in it, others a beam of light, but all of them felt peace when they looked upon it. The years kept rolling on, one after another, like the waves of the Atlantic. Borders changed, languages blended, clans disappeared. Only Grianan remained, and with it, its lady. The elders say that on the clearest days, when the sun rises and bathes the stones in gold, a feminine shadow is cast into the center of the circle. It belongs to no one, neither visitor nor keeper, and yet it moves softly, as though dancing with the breeze. Whoever dares remain there in silence feels a gentle warmth in the chest, and an inner voice whispering, "Remember, everything you touch is alive." That was how the Lady of Grianan Ailig ceased to be only a legend and became a symbol. Not of fear, but of harmony. Not of loss, but of continuity. Because Ireland, land of 1,000 greens, knows that the ancient spirits do not vanish. They transform, blend with. The air hide in the dew, and sometimes, only sometimes, reveal themselves again to remind the world of what it once was and what it still may become. And every time the sun touches the rounded stones of Grianan, it is said that she smiles, unseen, bathing the hills in her golden light, just as she did 1,000 years ago, when she was still a goddess of flesh and soul. As the centuries moved on, the world changed so much that the ancient names began to fade from memory. Yet among the hills of Inishowen, Grianan endured. Rain, wind, and mist covered it in green moss, but its stones held firm, as though the earth itself sustained them by its own will. In the 19th century, when scholars began to take interest in the ruins of Ireland, an archaeologist from Derry named Seamus O'Callaghan climbed the hill with his notebook and a group of assistants. He wanted to measure the exact diameter of the fort, sketch its walls, understand its structure. But he had no idea that his research would lead him far beyond scholarship. It was a summer morning, and the mist still lay sleeping in the valleys. From the summit, the landscape stretched all the way to the sea, a mosaic of greens, lakes, and winding roads. Seamus stood in awe of the perfection of the circle. The stones fitted together with such precision that it seemed impossible for human hands to have placed them there. While the others took measurements, he walked toward the center of the enclosure. There the silence was different, thicker, as though the air itself were holding a secret. "Strange," he murmured. "There is no wind, and yet the air vibrates." That night, he camped with his group beside the hill. At midnight, he woke with a start. A soft golden light was filtering through the entrance of the fort. He thought one of his men had lit a lantern, but as he drew closer, he saw it was neither fire nor lamp. It was something purer, almost alive. He stepped inside slowly. The radiance filled the circle, and in the center, beside the old covered well, stood a figure. She wore a white mantle that seemed woven from light itself, and her face shone with a beauty both serene and ancient. "Who are you?" Seamus asked, his voice trembling. "I am the one who keeps watch," she replied. "The one who remains when names are forgotten." He stepped back, astonished. "Are you a dream? A vision?" The lady smiled. "I am the memory of this land. I do not dream, nor do I wake. I exist between the two." Seamus bowed, overcome by a mixture of reverence and emotion. "I came to study the stones. I want to understand their origin, their purpose." "The purpose," she repeated gently, "is not in the stone, but in the heart of the one who beholds it." These stones were raised not only to protect a kingdom, but to remember the union between man and the sun, between life and the earth. The archaeologist said nothing. He had read about the ancient solar cults, about alignments with the solstices, but hearing those words from the lips of an ethereal being moved him profoundly. "Why do you show yourself now?" he asked at last. "Because the world forgets. Men look at stone and see history, but they do not feel its soul. You have felt it. That is why you are here." She stepped closer, and her light washed over the man's face. "Carry my story with you, Seamus O'Callaghan. Not on parchment, but in your gaze. When you speak of Grianan, do so with reverence. Tell them it is neither ruin nor temple, but a heart." As she spoke, she opened her hand. In her palm appeared a small fragment of stone, polished and warm. "Take it," she said. "It is my remembrance. When you doubt what you saw, hold it to the light of dawn." He took the stone. It was light in his hand, and beneath his fingertips it hummed softly, as though a breath were beating inside it. When he looked up again, the lady had faded away, and the radiance was slowly dying. The next morning, Seamus woke beside the well. His assistants found him asleep, his notebook open upon his chest. "I had a dream that felt terribly real," he told them, trying to convince himself. "I dreamed of the guardian of Grianan." But when he checked his pocket, he found the stone. In the sunlight, it gleamed with a golden shine. That discovery changed his life. He no longer wrote cold treatises or catalogues of ruins. In his personal diary, found many years later, he described Grianan as an ancient heart that still beats, sustained by the tenderness of a lady of light. And those who read his words felt something that could not be measured or drawn, a deep connection, an invisible presence wrapping the north of Ireland like a mantle. In time, the place was restored. Visitors began climbing the path to admire the views, and the locals told Seamus's story alongside the older ones. Some said that on certain dawns, when the mist dissolves and the sun touches the stones, a white figure can be seen walking among the walls, looking out toward the sea. "She is no ghost," the old people said. "She is the lady, greeting those who come with a good heart." And so the myth kept breathing, changing form, yet never dying. Today, when tourists climb to Grianan with their cameras and hiking boots, few realize they are walking on sacred ground. Even so, there are those who feel something strange when they enter the circle. A silence that does not weigh upon them. A calm that settles over the chest. Some say that if you remain there until the sun stands high and close your eyes, you will hear a faint humming, like a song without words. And if you are patient, you will feel a warm breeze graze your cheek, like a motherly caress. That, they say, is the lady welcoming you. And though no one sees her clearly, her presence remains part of the air. Grianan Aili, her fortress, is her body of stone. The wind, her voice. The dawn, her smile. Time passes, but she is still there, watching as humanity changes, as names are forgotten and hearts grow hard, and still she waits. Because the love she guards knows neither haste nor ending, and on clear nights, when the northern sky fills with stars and the sea reflects the light like a liquid mirror, the most sensitive souls swear they can see a line of golden fire running along the stones. It is not real fire, but the soul of Grianan igniting, reminding all who look on that beneath the layers of history, an ancient heart is still beating, the heart of the lady. They say there are places in the world where time does not move in quite the same way, where centuries fold back upon themselves like the pages of a book that opens only at its most cherished passages. Grianan Ailig is one of those places. There, at the summit of the hill, the air smells of eternity. It does not matter whether the visitor comes from the 9th century or the 21st. Whoever places a foot inside the circle of stone feels the same silence, the same invisible gaze watching with calm from beyond the years. Among the locals of County Donegal, a simple custom has survived. At every summer solstice, just before dawn, they climb to Grianan in silence, carrying wildflowers. There is no priest and no formal ceremony, only men, women, and children laying flowers on the stones while facing east. They do it out of respect, out of tradition, and also out of affection. Because in Ireland, when a story endures that long, no one can quite tell where myth ends and prayer begins. On one such solstice morning, the sky was clear and the hills were covered in dew. Among those climbing was an old woman named Eileen Byrne, with hair as white as sea foam. She had been born in a nearby farmhouse, and since childhood she had heard of the lady. She climbed slowly, leaning on her walking stick, while the horizon began to turn gold. When she reached the circle, the first ray of sunlight touched the stones. Eileen closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered a prayer. Then she felt it. A warm breeze brushed her cheek. It was not the cold wind of the Atlantic, but something soft, maternal, as though an unseen presence had greeted her. She opened her eyes and for a moment thought she saw a luminous figure on the far side of the well. It was not a clear vision, only an outline, a white shimmer dissolving into the light of dawn. Eileen smiled. "Thank you, my lady," she whispered. "Thank you for watching over us." The figure seemed to incline ever so slightly, as though returning the greeting, and then it vanished into the golden air. Later, the young people who had accompanied the old woman swore that the sun that morning had shone more brightly than ever before, and that the entire hill seemed to glow from within. Some laughed, others fell silent with reverence. But Eileen, as she walked back down, murmured, "The lady is still here. She has never left. She only waits for those who know how to see." And so, generation after generation, the lady kept appearing in subtle ways, a light upon the stones, a melody of harp strings carried by the wind, a voice that calms the lost. At times, she revealed herself to those who were suffering, at others, to those who had forgotten tenderness, always for the same purpose, to remind them that the earth listens, and that the love binding all things does not vanish, but changes form. Grianan Ailig still stands, Its circular walls endure through storms and ages. From its summit, 3 counties can be seen, and beyond them, the gleam of the Atlantic. At midday, when the sun is high, the stones cast shadows so exact they seem aligned to some hidden purpose. Some scientists believe it was a solar observatory. Others say it was a ceremonial fort. But the elders of the place smile at such theories and simply say, "It is the house of the sun, and the lady is its guardian." At night, when the moon rises and bathes the hill in pale light, Grianan seems to float between 2 worlds. If the wind blows in from the sea, it carries with it a faint, almost imperceptible sound, a harp chord, a suspended note in the air. And if you close your eyes, you can feel it, a very subtle warmth in the chest, as though someone from far away were reminding you that you are alive, that everything beats to the same music. That is what the Lady of Grianan Ailig represents. Not merely a myth from the past, but a living promise that even in the oldest places, light is still reborn. That memory does not die while there are hearts willing to listen. Some modern visitors, knowing nothing of the folklore, claim that when they reach the center of the circle, they feel a profound calm, an inexplicable serenity. Some say their watches stop for a moment, that their thoughts grow still, that the noise of the world seems to vanish. Tour guides smile and speak of ancient energy. But the locals know the truth. It is the lady offering silence. They tell that only a few years ago, a child was lost on the hill during a school outing. They searched and could not find him. When he finally appeared, he was sitting quietly on a stone, looking toward the horizon. He said that a lady dressed in white had spoken to him and told him to wait there, not to be afraid. The adults thought it was imagination, but the boy added, "She told me the wind would lead me home, and right then I heard my name in the air." The teacher wept when she heard that, because she swore she had shouted the boy's name only seconds before from the base of Grianan. And so the lady continues her task, invisible, gentle, patient. Her fortress remains a lighthouse of stone upon the hill. Years pass, wars come and go, but she endures, made of light and remembrance. They say that at the end of time, when the sun dies above the Atlantic and men have forgotten their songs, she will climb once more to the center of the circle and open the sacred well. From it will pour a current of golden water that will flow into every valley, awakening the sleeping earth. Then the lady will smile, and the voice of the ancient world will be heard again. But until that day arrives, she will remain there, keeping watch in silence, dancing through the mist. Whoever climbs with reverence, whoever looks without fear, will feel her presence, and whoever listens with the heart will hear her oldest whisper. Everything that has loved, lives. Everything that lives, loves. The wind repeats it as it descends the slopes, blending the murmur of the sea with the song of birds. And so ends, though in truth it never truly ends, the story of the Lady of Grianan Ailig, guardian of the sun and of memory, spirit of Northern Ireland, symbol of the eternal blooming within the fleeting. Grianan will remain standing as long as she keeps watch over it. And while someone still climbs that hill to feel the silence, the lady will go on, gazing toward the horizon, bathed in gold, her eyes filled with peace.